Hello and welcome to today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by Association Reserves, Inc. My name is Paige Daniels and I'm the Marketing Director at Association Reserves. I'll be serving as your moderator for today. How to Utilize Your Project Needs Analysis When Budgeting is a 30-minute webinar with some time for questions at the end. You can ask questions at any time by typing your question into the question box at the bottom of your control panel. We'll be answering your questions during the last 5 to 10 minutes of the broadcast. Now it's time to introduce our speaker. Sean Anderson has started working at Association Reserves in 1999. He opened our regional office in Orange County in 2003. Sean is a certified reserve specialist who has completed over 2,000 reserve studies and project needs analysis for properties ranging from small community associations to large master plan communities. So now I'd like to turn the floor over to Sean. Sean?
Good morning, everyone. As Paige mentioned, I'm Sean Anderson. I had the pleasure to meet many of you during our site visits when we did the project needs analysis walkthrough. So I wanted to kind of give everybody some information really quickly. I definitely recommend after our webinar, visiting our website at www.reservestudy.com. There's a wealth of educational resources there available to you. You can certainly also reach me anytime by email at sanderson, and that's SANDERSEN, at reservestudy.com. And feel free to also call me at 949-481-0421. The first thing I want to do, before we begin, I'd like to go over a few guidelines to help us get the most out of this. There are 3 ways you will be able to interact with us throughout the webinar. One way is to raise your hand and raise your hand to ask a question. The second way is to type the information or question into the box as I indicated there. And here's where we have to raise our hand. The third way to interact is to participate in the polls that we're going to be conducting, and Paige will launch them periodically throughout the session. That way we can kind of see, if you're seeing some of the things that we saw when we were doing the project needs analysis. So the best way to start this is to give it a try. Has everyone here attended a webinar before? And Paige is going to launch the poll right now. Okay, I'm going to start with discussing our common goal. Our common goal is to maintain our communities and budget properly, and we want to talk about how will the project needs analysis help. This discussion will let you know how the reports are going to help you with that long-term goal. The analysis consists of 3 items: the component list, the calculation of reserve strength, and a recommended multi-year funding plan. The first is a component list, and the second is not important for our discussion today. We're going to mainly focus on the first and the third items. You should have each gotten an executive summary of your reports that is going to give you a snapshot of everything we just discussed. It presents the entire reserve study in just a few pages. It will give you a snapshot of what we saw in your community. And you'll also be given and part of the executive summary, you're going to have a component list. And I'm going to ask Paige to pull up the next poll. Has everybody had a chance to look at your executive summaries? Great, great. Glad to see that. Okay, so if you've seen these, you are familiar with our component list. So we want to look at what is the component list and how do we use it. The component list tells us what major components we're funding for and what we're budgeting for. It is a snapshot of our communities. It captures our assets and lets us know what condition they're in. You'll be given information on the quantity, meaning how much of this component do we have. For example, do we have 10,000 square feet of asphalt? You'll be given its useful life, how long it should last, and then you'll be given its remaining life, how long that particular component has until it needs to be replaced. So for example, if we have a roof with a useful life of 10 or 15, we're saying that that type of roof should last 15 years. And if it's 14 years old and it has 1 year of remaining life, so we're saying we're going to need to replace that in one. And then you will also be given your current replacement cost, which is an estimate based on our research, estimating we keep a client database with cost histories, and it's important for you to keep a record of what you're seeing with replacement costs as well. A lot of our costs are based on things that we've seen in similar communities throughout the study we do. And this is a breakdown of what you'll see in the report. You'll get the component itself, HVAC units, and Montecito Vista had 162 of them. Useful life of 15, a remaining life of 7, and then a cost to replace. And what we do with that is we give a best case and a worst case, and then we fund for the average between the two. You'll also see in the report that you'll have a photographic inventory. All the information that we just talked about, the useful life, remaining life costs, are in there as well. I highly recommend that you take a look at those because when we go out, we look at the property and we see things that a lot of times people don't see. I've had managers give me a call after we completed the project needs analysis with other communities, and the manager will say, "What's that? We don't have that." And then I'll encourage them to take a look at the inventory section, and they'll see that they do indeed have that, and that's something that they need to be budgeting for and making sure that they're taken care of. So which assets are included? Obviously, we have the three criteria that we look at when we included components in the analysis. Is the component must have a predictable life. We want to make sure that we capture everything that qualifies with these three, by the way. We want to be able to predict lives. For instance, we know that wood should be painted every 4 or 5 years. So we want to make sure that we're anticipating that. We want to look at the costs and see if we can predict the costs. If we cannot predict the cost for replacement, then it wouldn't be appropriate to include it. So for instance, we would want to include replacement of all of the concrete sidewalks because we can't predict what that would cost and we can't predict its life. We would, however, want to include something like exterior painting because we know we do need to paint it every 4 or 5 years, and we know it does have a fairly predictable cost. Same with something like a pool filter or a water heater. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we're only funding for things that are above a certain cost threshold. If an asset costs less than $500, we would want to include them in our studies. They should be replaced as needed. So for example, if you have a light bulb that needs replacement, we're not going to concern ourselves with that. However, if we need to replace all of your pole lights, then that is something that we would want to include. And again, in the inventory section, we'll see that the components have a breakdown. We see our predictable life for metal fence painting and stucco painting. We see that they have predictable remaining lives and costs. Again, I'm going to encourage you to read the inventory and the paragraph that we give, because it states the condition of the components, it oftentimes will tell you why we're cycling the component at the rate we are, or if we feel that they're failing, why they need to be replaced. You may see things that you've not noticed. For example, I oftentimes will be on properties and I'll notice that a boiler is leaking, or water heaters are leaking, the iron is rusting. As managers, it's hard to capture that because you're seeing the community as a whole. So it was a very good idea for you to go through, take a look at these, see what we're seeing, and make sure that we're all on the same page. We have 2 reports for each property, the exterior report and the interior report. The exteriors include building exteriors, amenities, landscape interiors. The interior reports include components such as unit carpeting, linoleum, painting. I really want to stress that both are of equal importance. The interior are things that we see quite regularly. The exteriors are, however, things that end up being very big ticket items. So the interior report includes carpets such as unit flooring, unit carpeting, and interior painting. These are components that we likely hear about the most because we hear from our tenants, and we also see them during turnover. So it's pretty natural that that's what you're seeing. But there's a lot more to it. The way that we have structured the report is that these are all annual allowances. It does not fund for overall replacement. We're not going to anticipate that we're going to replace all the carpeting in all the units. We're doing those as we need to, generally at turnover. So these fund for partial replacement of the components, not overall. This is not meant to be an exact figure. One of the things we want to do as we go forward is watch those annual costs to ensure that our funding level is appropriate and that we're budgeting properly. So if we have, if we're actually spending more on something like carpet going forward, let's make sure that we let the analysts know, and next time we do the project needs analysis, we have even more accurate numbers. Again, you will have an inventory section of this, and if you'll notice, every component has a useful life of 1 and a remaining life of 0. That's going to tell us that every single year we're going to be doing something of this component. So in these 2 examples, we have bathrooms refurbishing and kitchens refurbishing. Again, we're not going to do all of these at once, but we do know that we need to do these at some point, so we're funding for those annually. Now, the exterior report includes components, as I mentioned before, that are more cyclical and are related to the building exteriors, clubhouse and mechanical components. So roofs, painting, asphalt, pool equipment, stuff like pool filters and pool heaters. And you'll find this, these have a similar inventory. One thing I want to point out, and I encourage you again to look at the inventory section, these are not boilerplate. A lot of your properties are going to vary somewhat in terms of lives and somewhat in terms of cost, but not as much because there are different cycles in different areas. Components that are in the desert have different life than components that are in coastal areas. For instance, painting cycles are generally different on the coast than they are on the interior. So we want to make sure we're looking at that and making sure that we see that. I'm going to ask another poll question. Are we seeing premature failing in our properties, something that we haven't noticed before? Okay, good. Okay. Well, that's good because in the last few years, I have noticed that we are seeing a lot of premature failing on assets, and a lot of that has to do with differences in how things are made. But also, I wanted to give an example and tell a story that I've noted that asphalt is failing at a much more rapid pace than it has in the past. We used to not fund for asphalt resurfacing, and then about 8 or 9 years ago, we started funding for it at a 30-year life cycle, and now generally being told by asphalt experts that asphalt really only has a 20-year life. I attended a lecture recently that stated that this is due to the nearly doubling of trash trucks that are on the roads in our communities. The expert stated that it used to be that one trash truck would drive through a community once a week. Now the trash trucks are larger, and we have 2, sometimes 3 trucks that are going through our communities. And he stated that one truck is the equivalent of 3,000 SUVs on your road at one time, and so that just adds tremendous wear and tear. So if we triple that with recycling, trash trucks, and green waste trucks, we see that our asphalt's under significant stress. So that's why we're seeing premature deterioration there. And with that, again, I'm going to encourage you to watch your trash areas if you have trash trucks coming through. A lot of communities are seeing failure in front of the trash enclosures, and if that's the case, we want to be looking at possibly putting seeing about budgeting for a concrete pad to be placed in front of those, because asphalt is just not holding up to the stress. Other components that we're seeing that happen with is we are seeing the paints failing a little bit more rapidly than it had in the past, and certainly full plaster is failing a lot more rapidly than it had in the past. So as you can see, in looking at this community, their asphalt is starting to fail. Sealing and repairs are needed now. I would recommend that at this point, when the community looks at their project needs analysis, that they see this and they start obtaining bids. And we want to take a look at the bids, and I would also recommend that they get bids for resurfacing, just to make sure that the first thing we want to get is bids for sealing and repairs. Obviously, this community right here, the asphalt surface is very dry. It's going to need some repairs, so we're going to want to do a slurry seal. But I also recommend getting a bid to look at what it will cost for resurfacing, because that's a record that we want to have, and we want to make sure that as we're going forward, we're anticipating accurate costs. The costs in the analysis are based on estimates that we research and we have in our database. They should be close to the bids you receive. If the proposals you obtain are different, if you get a good idea to research why, the asphalt above needs additional repairs. It might be that we didn't capture the right amount of repairs that are going to be needed, or maybe it's lower or the costs are coming in lower because we were being too aggressive with repairs. Has anybody noticed that our costs are not comparable to some of the costs that you're seeing? I'm sorry, Paige is going to have a poll for that. Are we seeing a significant increase in costs in our communities? Okay, good. Oh, okay. Okay, great. Well, if our bids are coming in at costs, if our bids are coming in and the cost of the project needs analysis are not matching, please make sure you're keeping a record of that and letting us know. We want to make sure we have accurate and up-to-date information. When you do a P&A in the future, those costs should be included. And that's important for not only your community but for others. A lot of our communities are built very similarly, and so it'll help even with other communities that when we're budgeting for them in the future, we have actual costs for those components. Now, another thing I want to talk about is that preventive maintenance is essential. Preventive maintenance will help to keep the overall cost lower for the communities, and it will help to avoid catastrophic failure. Many communities I work with simply ignore essential preventive maintenance and end up spending a lot more money than they need to in the long run. I have a community that neglected their decking, and it's certainly not Oakview, it's another community, but a community that neglected their decking to the point where a $15,000 seal cost ended up being a $150,000 rebuild cost for the decking because they've been neglected. So preventive maintenance is essential. We want to make sure that we're sealing things that need to be sealed, like decking, like asphalt. We don't want to fall into premature failure because then we're just going to be spending a lot more money than we need to. Okay. I'm also going to encourage you when you get your project needs analysis reports, take a look at our Table 3. Table 3, this is a very good table for you to work with when putting together your budget. If you take a look at the far right component, or the far right column, you'll see that it gives a breakdown of how much you should be budgeting per component per month, and that's summed at the bottom. So when we say that something had, we're recommending a $2,800 a month, that's for the total, and this table will give you a breakdown of each component. I encourage you to take a look at that and make sure that we're budgeting properly for those components. Proper budgeting and preventive maintenance will allow us to continue to have welcoming communities that people are happy to live in. My overall impression has been that Jamboree's properties are very nice, very well maintained, very well run communities. And so we want to make sure that our buildings continue to be that way and they're well maintained and pleasant places to live. I think that'll create a good environment that our tenants will want to live in, and it'll attract new people who want to come to our communities. And that's certainly true for the interiors as well. The interiors, well, we want our potential occupants to have an inviting and nice home. The interior report will help us to budget properly and keep a fresh, welcoming look for the interiors and when turnover occurs. So in conclusion, we want to maintain our assets through preventive maintenance and replace them when they need to be replaced. And we want to avoid catastrophic failure. I think that's the worst case scenario. We need to properly budget to accomplish this, and we need to replace things at proper times. We don't want to fall into obsolescence. We don't want to be getting we don't want to delay replacement of essential components. And the project needs analysis should be used as a tool to achieve that goal. So that's it for my prepared statements. For further questions, obviously, you can contact me at any time. You have my phone number and my email address. And Paige, do we have any questions that anybody has?
Right now, we do not have any questions. As I mentioned earlier, you can ask a question by typing it into the question box at the bottom of your control panel. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and ask now. Okay, Sean, we have one question so far. Where do you get your replacement cost info?
Okay, that's an excellent question. We get our replacement cost info. Well, number one, we do some estimation in-house, but we have a client cost database that we can track. We can track components that are replaced in similar communities. So if we see that how much is a pool heater in Victorville or in Irvine, we have that kind of information there. We also research with vendors, so we use a lot different, and we use pricing books and stuff like that. So we make sure that we're and ultimately the best is if we have actuals from the community that we're working with. So if that community has painted their buildings, if they can give us the cost to paint those buildings, we build that into reports and use that going forward.
Okay, great. Here's another question. Can the managers send over bids as they get them so that the study could be updated with those figures?
I would love that. Yeah, we keep a file for each property, and the more information, the better going forward. We would just add it to our files, and that way we make sure that in the long run we have the most accurate information possible.
Okay, great. Here's another one. Can we save money by delaying doing a project?
No, because that goes into, I mean, I suppose in some ways you can, but you might be taking a step backwards. That it goes into my discussion that I had about the decking with that other community, that they didn't see that they thought they were saving money by not spending $15,000 to seal their decking, and they quote unquote saved that $15,000 for a couple years, and then they just started having lots of rot, lots of peeling, and then they ended up having to spend $150,000. So you end up spending the money in the long run.
Okay. Next question. Is there a license to do what you do?
Yeah, well, I'm a certified reserve specialist through the Community Associations Institute. So the short answer is yes. So yes, yes, sir.
Okay, we have one more. This is going to be our final question. You show interior painting on your capital needs assessment when it's paid from the operations account. Why?
Okay. Well, the assumption is that we will be doing annual expenses on that. Perhaps in that particular community, it's still handled with operating funds, but we did include that in the interior stuff project analysis.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sean. That concludes our webinar. If you're interested in receiving our newsletters or announcements of future webinars, visit our website to join our mailing list. As you exit this webinar, a survey will display. By completing this survey, you will be helping us make continuous improvements to our presentations. If you do have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact Sean via email or call him on the phone. I want to thank you all for attending. If you have any questions or if there's any way we can be of service to you, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you again. Goodbye.